Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 36 of the Fifth Meeple Board Game Podcast. We are a group of diverse friends who offer our takes on the latest and greatest board games to hit our table. I'm your host, Daniela, the goofy noob, and I am joined today by the collector.
Hey, this is David.
And the intellectual introvert.
Hi, everybody. This is Chris.
And last but not least, the deluxeifier.
Hey, everybody. That's Pete.
All right, guys, today we cope with our cravings for colonization, managing our time and resources as we explore the unknown. We'll start underwater, scouring seas, conquering kingdoms, and exploiting assets as we dare to dominate the deep in Aquatica. Then we're back in ancient Rome where the cloth is fine, we're drinking wine, and the fate of the Mediterranean is on the line in Concordia. And finally, because we just can't help ourselves, we'll create a clash of kingdoms as we pit these games against each other in our ultimate showdown, the Battle of the Funnest. But before we dive into our discussion, David, what's our topic of discussion for today?
Yeah, so this is something that's going on right now in the board game community, and it's really about sequels to board games or lines, I want to say, that we're doing our branding. So there's a game that just got announced from Stonemaier Games this week called Finspan, and there's been a lot of things. You might have seen some memes online about it. What's your take, though, on, a brand trying to create something? Obviously they have Wormspan. It started with Wingspan. Now they're going with Finspan. People thought it was a joke at first, but it doesn't look like it's a joke. Looks like it's coming out. The game actually doesn't look too bad. But what are you guys' thoughts about the monetization of trying to build branding with existing IP that's out there?
So I'll start with Finspan. When I first saw that, honestly, my first thought was, you got to be kidding me. And probably because they did the Wormspan and then Finspan so quickly behind it. But then as I started to think about it, and as I started to see what other people were saying online, and again, opening my mind to those thoughts, how many different versions of Codenames are out there? And they're all the same game. It's just different versions, right? And how many versions of Catan? And which one is it that speaks to you? I do think that Wormspan was different than Wingspan. So it was similar DNA, but it wasn't exactly the same. So there was a twist. I think it's a case where you're not going to need them all, but you talk about Wingspan and got a lot of people in to play games that otherwise wouldn't. Maybe Finspan can do that too. You don't need them both. You need the one that's for fishing. And Danielle is looking like she's going to slap me.
No, I am exceptionally confused on what word you're saying. Thin span?
Finspan.
Fin. Oh, like fish.
Yeah.
Oh, I was like, what are we talking about? No, I agree with Chris. That came to my mind. Same thing with old Trivial Pursuit, if you would. You come out with different boards and packs and games so people who might have an interest in a certain topic like it. Personally, Wingspan, it's whatever for me. I probably might like Wormspan a little better. I think it's a little more mythological. I like things like that a little bit more. So I think it's okay to actually do that on games because I think you're gathering a bigger subject ground when you can appeal to more people. And to your point, Chris, with Codenames, you've got Harry Potter, you've got Disney, you've got all those different types of packs that you could play with as well.
Well, I thought it was a joke at first because I saw a bunch of other ones come out as well. The thing that I would get upset about is if you expect a game like Wingspan and then you go to Wormspan, they shared a lot of DNA. If you go into this Finspan, does that still share the DNA? If it does, I'm more on board with it. But if it's a cash grab and a totally different game and they're just spinning it off of the name, that's kind of where I draw the line and say, nah, that gets confusing then. Because then when somebody goes to a board game and they look at it and say, oh, I like this one, I should like this one, and it's a totally different game. It might have something, set collection or totally different mechanic than the original game. So that's kind of my take on it. I have no idea what Finspan is like or what it does, but we'll see when it comes out.
Yeah, right now the designers of Finspan is David Gordon and Michael O'Connell. So there are two different designers on this game than any of the other games. From what I've seen, it turns the Wingspan board vertical. So that's something that's going to be interesting. You're trying to fish and go down. But I agree with Pete. The first time I had seen this, I thought it was a complete joke. I thought, wow, somebody's doing that, right? And then when you found out it was real, I think instantly my mind was, how many websites can I go out there and try to and try to get, maybe they're all being taken right now because if they know they're on this ramp. But
and Finspan is real, but there's about 1,000 fake ones out there now that people are having a lot of fun with it. So I think I saw there was one about bridges called Span and things like that. And then one guy said he just can't take it anymore. He doesn't have the attention span.
Oh,
for it.
jeez. But
So many good things here.
all right, thanks, David. So those are opinions on sequels and fin span, whatever that word is again. But we'd love to know what you guys all think out there and have to say about this topic. So let us know by sending us an email at thefifthmeeple@gmail.com. Follow us on social media or on our BGG Guild, or checking out our website at thefifthmeeple.com. And before you forget, why not hit the subscribe button so you never miss one of our shows? If you want to help us grow, one of the best ways is to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. And if you do, we just might read it in a future episode. And finally, as always, we really do want to thank you guys just so much for listening and giving us an attention, and just really appreciate that from all of you. Well, guys, we have a lot to explore today, so let's get deep into Aquatica.
Aquatica is a 1 to 4 player hand management engine building game where you become a mighty ocean king, struggling to bring glory to your realm. The Cold Waters expansion increases the maximum player count to 5, while also adding several modules and additional cards. Each player starts the game with a hand of 6 character cards and 4 trained mantas, which provide benefits when taking actions. On your turn, as your main action, you play one of the cards from your hand and perform the effects shown on the card, which may include recruiting new characters into your hand from the ocean market, costing you between 0 and 5 coins, buying a location card from those displayed on the board, spending coins to place it on your personal player board, conquering a location, spending power to take a location card and place it on your personal board, scout the ocean, which cycles the location cards available and decreases the strength of some of them, raise a location in your realm, sliding it deeper into your player board, score a fully exploited location for game end points, or recover all of your used cards to your hand and flip your spent mantas back to active. Resources do not last from turn to turn. Any coins or power must be earned and spent within the confines of a single turn, or they are lost. Anytime during your turn, you may flip your mantas to gain coins or power, or to raise a location in your realm, potentially making more useful resources available to you to exploit. Exploiting locations provides a variety of effects, again sliding the location deeper into your board when you do, and possibly earning another manta in the process. At any time during your turn, you may also claim one of 4 goals once you've fulfilled the requirements. The sooner you claim a goal, the more points you earn, but you'll have to sacrifice a trained manta to do so. The game end is triggered when either the character deck or the location deck runs out, or when a single player has claimed all 4 goals. Players earn points for the locations they've scored, the goals they've achieved, and for the number of character cards in their hand at game's end. The player with the most points wins the game and gets to go for a refreshing swim in the ocean. Aquatica was designed by Ivan Tazovsky and was first published in 2019 by Cosmodrome Games.
All right, guys, let's talk about some of the things in this game that are really enjoyable. Honestly, when we put this game out there, it's really beautiful. I really think the components and all of that are really well done. It looks really nice on the table. The tableaus are very nice. So let's talk about some of the things like that that really just spoke to us as we played.
The components really are superb. Usually I'm not a big fan of like resin type components, but with the mantas, they did a really fantastic job with it. You don't need coins because, as Chris said, you spend those coins as you're using them. So as far as components go, it's really those mantas which are a big key. But the other really great thing about the game is the player board. The way that works, and you can slide that up. Very, very nicely done. Dual layer. Every game should be, if you have a player board where you're hiding cards or tucking cards under, that's really the way to do it.
I think it's the nicest player board I think I can remember ever playing with. I mean, and not just that it looks nice and it functions nice, but then the act of sliding that card in there, everything's designed really, really well.
Agreed.
Yeah, it definitely feels satisfying as you slide those cards around.
I was just going to say, like, when you chain something correctly playing this game and it works out, you feel like really smart sitting at the table. So that's really, really fun aspect of that game that I really enjoyed to see.
And there's a lot of opportunity to do that. That was one of my highlights too. Being clever here, you've got tons of opportunities. And when you're chaining, as you said, tons of them together and then one feeds the other one, that to me is a beautiful part of any game where you can find those, again, chains, clever ways to really put things together.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if, you could also get a little bit of paralysis analysis doing that as well. Like if someone is chaining the living daylights on us and they're like in the Marianas Trench, they're like, let's go. But you can really get some nice stuff going in those. And that was really fun to see. I think everybody, when we were watching play do that, was like, oh, wow. Like you kind of feel good for everybody sitting at the table when they do that.
Yeah, there's some interesting decisions when you're playing the game or you're going to buy cards. I like the fact that there's actually two types of resources to buy, the coins or the power. And that really makes you think differently when you're looking at the cards and figuring out which ones you want to draft and put into your tableau, because you do want that synergy. And I think it's a really cool mechanic that there's those two resources to purchase your cards from.
And the idea that you can't carry them over, that you have to earn them and spend them in a single turn. When we first learned this, I was like, how is that ever going to work? How do we even keep track of that? And then how are you ever going to get enough? I think we played one game with the expansion, and some of the things were like, you need 12 coins.
Yeah.
I think then you're like, there's no way we're ever going to do that.
How?
And yet we did. And again, it's finding those combinations.
Well, some of us did.
Okay, well, some of us did. But still, you look at it like, how is that ever going to work? And it does. And again, when you make it work, that's again, that little endorphin rush. Is that what it's called? When just, wow, look what I just did. And you feel really good about it, and you accomplish something in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I agree with all what you guys are saying. I do like the combos. I think it feels really good, as you're playing this game with those combos. And just like Pete was saying, I mean, I'm just kind of ditto everything on here. But, the fact that you can buy with coins or power, kind of go two different routes. I always like when you can spend different resources to get the same card, so you can take different paths. And I think it creates those variable paths. But yeah, the combo-tastic turns, I mean, I could see why people like this game.
Yeah, I think too, with the cards, they're extremely easy to understand what the card does. I really appreciate that in a game where it's not so like they're using all these different words that you maybe have played on another game that means something different. But in this game, to me, it's very straightforward. I think the only word I had trouble with was scout. When you did scouting, I had to really rethink of what that meant in this game personally.
Yeah, for me, I thought the iconography at times it wasn't super intuitive. The coins and the strength power obviously are. Some of the other iconography, not so much. But at the same time, the reference for iconography was really good. And when I did, okay, what does that do? I could very easily find it.
Yeah.
We trash rule books, we trash cheat sheets a lot on the podcast. But this one I thought worked really well. Anytime I needed to know what something did, it took me no time at all to find it. And therefore I wasn't sitting there waiting. Oh, what is that? Okay, that's it. And then you move on.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
So yeah, I think there's a really good, interesting decision here in this game where, you either can go after a lot of points and kind of go and manipulate that route, or you could try to build your deck. And what I talk about deck is, all the character cards that you're playing for actions. And I think that it's an interesting decision space to see how much do you want to go down that path at the expense of sometimes going after point cards. Because a lot of times you're having to make a decision on which way you want to go. And it's interesting to see how bloated some people's decks get, when they're flipping through stuff, and then, how lean you could potentially be too, but really just focus more on the points and the combos on the other side of the board. So I think it's a good, interesting decision space. The artwork looks great too while I'm reading the cards.
Yeah, I also like that you can play this game within an hour. I think for the quality of this game, the type of game that it is, it's enjoyable to get out and get on the table, and you can play it in an hour. I mean, I think our first teach was even wasn't that long, but once we got the rhythm and we were down, it was a very nice turns as we were going around. I don't think there was any lagging too much. To me, it's a very enjoyable game to have on the table, and I would play this quite a bit.
I agree. It's a nice, quick game. To me, the base game itself, though, maybe starting to get into some of our dislikes or things that didn't speak to us, I think it's almost a little too simple and too quick. And I feel like when I'm just playing the base game, that game's over, and I didn't get to have anywhere near as much experience or fun as I want to. And part of that is really the goals are so easy to get if you're just using the base game. If you're not using the module, you start to flip those out. To me, you have to. If you're using the 4 that are printed on that board, to me, it's a boring game. You start to get some of those others out, then it starts to get interesting. When you get out the expansion and get some of those modules out, now it's a pretty deep game.
And I would say that that's for really thinky people. You guys love to analyze everything to the max, which is fine. I mean, that's the type of games you guys enjoy. I like the base game. I would have to play a little bit more with those expansions just to see, if I can chain any of that and make those top goals work. For me, being a simpleton, I do enjoy that base, but I can understand what you guys are saying and how it does add another level of hardness to this that would bring a little bit more enjoyment for you.
I'm okay with it not being super hard. Just to me, those were so easy to get on the base. The board that the pre-printed board, those are so easy to get in my mind. It's just too fast. Mm-hmm. I'm okay with it. Okay, it's not as hard to get, but I just feel like it was over. I didn't get to do anywhere near what I wanted to do.
Yeah, I think the first 2 games that I played, the game ended before I even knew it was even close, and which kind of threw me off a little bit because I wasn't paying attention to the things that you do need to pay attention to, which are those goals at the very top. Because as soon as somebody gets all 4 of those goals, game, triggers the game end. So it's kind of one of those things. It's a lighter game. I agree with Daniela. It's a good, easy teach. I think it does a good entry level into how to actually, lay down your cards and purchase your cards. And I think it's a good intro to the tableau building part of it, especially the cascading part, which is really cool.
Yeah, I mean, a criticism I might have with this game, and I haven't played it a ton, like maybe some of the other people out there, but I played it probably 5 to 8 times, and I still think there's some cards in this deck that are a little bit OP or overpowered. I don't know for certain. I can't say, I haven't played, 300 games or anything like that. But I feel like a couple cards when they come out in the deck, one lets you kind of go through the discard pile.
The anglerfish.
The anglerfish. I feel like that card is very overpowered, and it just kind of is luck on a little bit on where you are with that draw. When does it come out? Where are you sitting? How much are you buying it for? And so I think some of the cards, I don't know if there is a balance issue there, but I do think that some of the cards are a little bit overpowered if you don't get them.
Yeah, one of the things with card games that have the cards like that, especially when you're shuffling the deck and you don't know what's coming out, there is that risk of, somebody just flipping the card over and, it's a great card. Now, fortunately, the way that the river works on that, when the card first comes out, it's much more expensive to try to grab. So you can't necessarily grab it right away. But the other thing that kind of throws me a little bit, there's times where you're doing that scout action because there's nothing there that I can really grab. So I do the scout action and it's a swing and a miss. Those things kind of get me a little frustrated because the game itself, when I'm playing the game, I'm not watching too much. And maybe this is why I lose, but I'm not watching too much what everybody else is doing. And that's why I should be paying attention to, those end game goals and scoring. But this is a game where I think your head's down, you're looking at your hand, you're looking out on the board. And that's really the only thing that you're going to base your decision off of, what's on the board, not necessarily what other people have. So to me, this is more of a individual, I don't want to say a solitaire type game, but I don't think there's that level of interaction. There is some, but I don't think there's that level of interaction that I personally enjoy in most of my games.
See, I was watching some people's colors, though. Was anybody else watching that? We all got specific colors in the game. I was kind of watching, I know someone's going to need that white one or someone's going to need that blue one. So I don't know.
Especially with the advanced goals when those really mattered. How many of each one did you get or something like that? But again, that's a hate draft.
And that's why I lose.
I mean, it does feel a little bit like Arc Nova in that sense, right? It's a little bit more solitary. You do affect people, but not to the extent where there's like a ton of player interaction, I would say. So I agree with you, Pete, on that point.
With the advanced goals, can you play that with less than 5 players? Does anybody know?
I don't see why not.
You're talking about the goals that come in the expansion. So
yes.
the module that you lay on top, I think you can.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
See,
yeah, for sure.
I wonder, I almost think the game was a little bit slow with 5. I'm just wondering if any of you guys had a thought about like the sweet spot and number on this. I'm thinking like 3 people like playing this game would be enjoyable.
3 is usually the magic number for games. Yeah. It always works out well because it's not one-on-one, and there's always that contention with trying to keep that balance.
Like 5 felt like a lot to me.
5 felt like a lot, and I think it depends who you're playing with too. But we talked before about chaining actions together, and sometimes figuring out what you're doing, or even just executing all that, takes a while. And if there's 4 other players, there's not a whole lot you can do when it's not your turn.
Yeah.
You can figure out what do you think you need to do, because you said it's kind of you're playing your own game.
Yeah.
But then you can't even look at the board and say, okay, I'm going to take that card.
Because someone could.
And you got 4 people in front of you and wipe it.
Yep.
And then when they do wipe it, another one doesn't come out. So you just kind of have to wait until it comes back to you. So yes, I played a 3-player game with my kids. My son got this for Christmas. I wasn't worried too much about downtime. Even with Julia, who doesn't play these type of games very often, she was learning. It still wasn't downtime. I had written down, though, for when we were playing here with a lot of players, that there was a lot of downtime.
Yes, I agree. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think when we played with 5 players, the time was around an hour and 15 minutes. It was weird because I actually thought, I agree with Daniela, I thought the game lasted long, but when I looked at the clock, I was surprised to see it was only an hour and 15 when we played with 5. And then when we actually played this game with 4, it went down to like 56 minutes. So take that for what it's worth. But I do feel like this game, it did the opposite. It felt like it was long, but it actually ended up coming in a little bit shorter than I thought.
What about the color scheme? I wouldn't have to spend much time on there. The color scheme in my mind is terrible. And to me, there's two things for me, and I don't really have issues seeing, other than I'm getting old. So, but I have trouble reading, but typically not with colors. But gray mantas with this terrible purple printing on it. Who thought that was a good idea? How did that get through playtesting? And then even just the player colors, where there's like a red and an orange, and it's hard for me to tell which is which. Yeah, which is which. So I thought they could have done better on the colors.
I mean, I think the board and the cards, I didn't have a problem with those, but I agree the red and the orange, those two different player color cards were very difficult. And also, I agree with the mantas too. Yeah, the color on that was like, what size is? And it's very, very small.
Yeah, and I think there was a blue and the green were a little close too, if I remember correctly. But I did have colors written down here as well, Chris. So I agree with you on that. Not the end of the world, but I think they could have done a better job.
I think the mantas is the big one, because you've got all these mantas that, okay, I just finished this card. I need a manta with one coin on it.
Yeah, we were flipping over here, David and I. Yeah, we were like
it's just
looking
so
through
hard
them.
to see it. When it's right in front of you, great. But when it, I don't know, they could have done better. And then I like the fact that there are, I like asymmetric factions or asymmetric capabilities. There is a form of asymmetry in here, especially if you have some of the goals where you're trying to get things of your own color, where if you're the green player and you can more easily, as a result, get green locations because you have your special manta, you're kind of playing more with the green locations. And the green locations have different types, typically, of benefits than the blue ones do, than the yellow one does. So that to me is good. It's a little nitpick, I guess. What I don't like is, in order to be able to experience that other asymmetric piece, you have to play a different color. And so now all of a sudden I'm not playing green, I'm playing blue, and I'm looking at where the mantas are. I'm like, oh, green's doing this, and no, that's not me. And again, it's a nitpick, but it's just, I don't need to be thinking about what color I am. I'm always green. Let me be green, but if I want to experience the game a different way, I have to be something else. And then someone else has to be green.
I did the same thing too, because for our listeners, I usually play yellow, and that's kind of the color that I usually play, just so I know which are my pieces. But the last game we did play, I did try a different color, and I'm good enough to know which color it is, but it does throw you a little bit for a loop when you're not used to playing a particular color. I usually bounce between one or two colors.
The good news is you have enough downtime while you're waiting for your turn to remind yourself what color you are. So,
all right, well, let's take it over to the collector's corner. David, what about this game?
Yeah, so this game right now, if you go on Amazon, it's $44.99, so about $45. You could buy it used for around $30. We did play, though, with the Cold Water expansion that adds the 5th player in the game, because the base game only comes for 4 players. So the Cold Water expansion is actually a little bit hard to find. It's actually out of print. And most of the board game stores that I looked up online, it's just not here in the US anymore. So you're actually finding that price for the expansion only pushed up on the used market. So you're going to find it around 30 to 40 bucks right now used. So for the game that we were playing, base game plus the Cold Water expansion, if you went down and you tried to buy it right now, you'd probably be around 85 bucks. Used, maybe you could work out a deal with somebody around $60 to $70. Maybe you could offer them, but the Cold Water expansion is actually, seems like it's semi-hard to get right now. Maybe it's in between print runs, but the price I saw, I think there's only 1 copy or 2 copies right now on BGG, and they're over $40 for just the expansion. So.
All right. Well, staying with you, final thoughts then, David.
I actually got this game for my wife. So this is a game that I bought to gift because at the time we were dating, she was really into water. She loves the water and stuff. So I was like, oh, this maybe is a game we'll play together. It sat on our shelf until we all busted this game out, about a month or 2 ago. So it's been like 4 years and we never played it.
Have you played it with her yet?
No, we still haven't played it. I actually, now that I played it, I don't actually think she'll like this game. So we probably won't play this game together.
That's funny.
But yeah, my final thoughts are, I think the combos are really great. I think that if you play at a lower player count, I think it probably would be better just because the turns would be more frequent. But I'd be interested to see what they had a new expansion called Coral Reefs, I think, come out. And it seemed to add a lot of bright neon colors to this board. So I think it could probably really pop on the dark board that it's in. So it'd be interesting to play it. If I saw this game, I probably wouldn't walk away from it necessarily. Okay. I'd be good with playing it. Going over to Pete.
This game really is a beautiful game. There's not much to really bling out. I enjoyed the play of it. The card play is pretty interesting, again, where you're sliding that up and chaining that your tableau. That's not one of my most favorite mechanics, but I did enjoy it here because it worked so well. Because a lot of games where you're trying to do that, there's not a good mechanic to say, I use this. But when you actually slide the card up and it goes away and you know what you have, it just works really well. So I enjoyed the game. I think it was a good play. Chris?
Yeah, I've enjoyed this game. I've actually played it 2 players, 3 players, 4, and 5. I mentioned my son got it for Christmas. We played head-to-head. It played pretty well that way. 3-player game went well. And again, other than a little more downtime, I still thought 4 and 5 were still fun. The components, other than that color scheme, is excellent. And that feeling of being clever as you put things together, and even the little things in there where some of the spaces, as you're exploiting that location, all of a sudden there's a blank spot, and now you've got to figure that into being able to do that as well. Just a bunch of different ways to be clever. I enjoy that, so I've enjoyed every play I've had of this.
Yeah, I think overall, I think the guys just said a lot of my sentiments. I really like the chaining aspect of this game. I liked the tableau. I thought it was just really unique. I like the quickness of this game to play this in an hour. For me, this is really my level of thinkiness that I like to get into after a long day of work. So a little bit dumbed down for those if you don't want something super heavy. But overall, just I've really enjoyed every time we played this game. So those are my final thoughts. Well, now it's probably a good time to head for the shore and embark on our discussion of Concordia.
Concordia is a 2 to 5 player hand management and set collection game set in the Roman Empire 2,000 years ago. Players guide their dynasties, dispatching colonists to remote realms to develop their trade network and, of course, please the gods. Concordia takes place on one of 2 maps. The Imperium side represents the entire Mediterranean Sea and suits 3 to 5 players, while the Italia side focuses on Italy for 2 to 4 players. Each player starts the game with a hand of 7 personality cards, a mixture of goods, 2 colonists on the map and 4 in reserve, and a little bit of money. On your turn, you play 1 personality card from your hand and take the associated action. The Architect card allows you to move your colonists along the map routes, then build houses in the adjacent cities. Each city specializes in a certain type of good, brick, food, tools, wine, or cloth, and the cost to build depends on the type of city and the number of other houses already present. The Prefect card provides you with the most valuable good in a chosen province and also provides goods for all players with houses in that chosen province. Alternatively, you can take money based on how many provinces have previously been exploited. With the Colonist card, you either add a new colonist to the board by paying resources or receive money based on the number of your active colonists. The Mercator card provides you with a small amount of money that allows you to buy or sell up to 2 types of goods. With the Diplomat card, you can execute the action shown on the last face-up card of any other player. The Senator and Consul cards allow you to purchase personality cards from the market, paying the price in goods shown. As cards are bought, new cards, often increasing in strength, repopulate the market. Specialist cards provide game end bonuses for houses in specific cities, and Tribune cards allow you to reclaim your spent cards, gain money, and spend goods for a new colonist. The game end is triggered when the last personality card is purchased or when a player builds their 15th house. Players then score points based on the cards they have accumulated during the game. Each is tied to a certain god, and each type of god provides bonuses in different ways. These bonuses are earned for amount of money, number of non-brick houses, number of provinces with houses, variety of goods produced, number of active colonists, houses of specific types, and for triggering the game end. Having more cards of a particular god increases the associated bonus. The player with the most points wins the game and celebrates by drinking wine while wrapped in fine cloth. Concordia was designed by Matt Gertz and was first published in 2013 by Rio Grande Games.
All right, thanks, Chris. I'm actually pretty excited to hear what Pete thinks about this because it has to do with Rome again, and he's been on a Rome hating binge lately, so this is going to be super interesting. But let's once again get into our likes. What are the things that we like about this game? What's enjoyable? What are the things that when it comes out that you're just enjoying and liking about the game?
The thing that I really like about this game is that you start off with the same deck, and at most deck building games, as you're kind of building your own deck and you're kind of becoming asymmetric, I really like that this game, they have all the information on the cards. You know, you don't have to look up anything. It's all right there, kind of how to play it. I feel like more games should just be that direct. It's like, hey, this is easy. I play this card. I do everything it says on this card. But then I like that as you buy cards, the cards are still the same. Like, there'll still be a prefect, except it has a little bit of an added power. So, you know, I'm not having to worry about, like, what is that card I'm never going to see because somebody else bought it and there's only, like, 2 of them in the deck. Yeah. I'm always going to know that, hey, that's a Mercator card, but, you know, it has +5 coins instead of +3. And I like that it's just a little bit different, but I can kind of absorb what the other opponents are doing at the table without actually having to see, oh, that's just like a brand new one-off card I'll never ever see again. And have to learn what it is and try to, you know, look up the power in the rule book or something. I feel like that system is really great on this game, and it helps to actually make the game pop with the player interaction instead of trying to focus on learning all the different kind of hidden rules and hidden cards that might be in the play. So I really like that.
I think that's a great point, David.
And on those cards, each one comes with is tied to a certain god. Each one of those gods gives you points in a different way, and there are a lot of different ways to score points. So there's not you have to go this path. I think for a while when I first started playing this, I thought there was, but then you start to explore and you realize no, each one has a different way, and sometimes the cards define what your path's going to be. Sometimes your path defines what cards you want. But there are a lot of different ways to score points, and I had a lot of fun, David, last time we played this, just watching you do a totally different approach to the way you were playing. I think you focused on just a couple of gods. You were play a couple cards, get your cards back out, play your tribute. Get a couple cards, and it was like, well, I don't know what you're doing over there, but you darn near won because
you, Chris.
but what you were doing was you're saying, okay, I'm going to focus on those gods and I'm going to maximize it as much as I can. And I thought, it almost worked. It almost worked.
I think when David comes to the table and he's like, I'm playing this a different way, he says it to himself. We all hear it, and then we're all watching what he's doing. Yeah.
Now, the downside of different gods score different ways is you can do a whole lot of stuff and score no points.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. Look at all these different houses I built. Yeah, but I have one card that scores for that, and all these things that the cards I do have, I didn't have anything for it. So there is that trap. But I think that's true in any game. But recognize there are different ways to score them, but make sure you're matching up what you're doing with the cards that you're getting.
Yeah, I think what I like about this game when we played is that there's a lot you want to do, but there's a lot of constraints as well as you're playing it. I think in the last game we played, wheat, there was one way to get wheat, which was interesting. I don't know if we've ever played it that way before, but I also think that like kind of leads to a little bit of heartache, but I actually don't mind that when you're kind of going through, and sometimes you're wasting a turn if you've made a really bad move or something like that. And I think that's the learning part of this game that I enjoy, trying to figure out, I can't do that next time because I just wasted an entire round. So
no, one of the things first of all, let me say, I don't hate all games that are Rome themed. This is
I don't believe you. No,
but
glory to Rome.
No, but this one I really enjoyed it. And one thing that I like about games, especially when they're resource gathering, is when you have, as Daniela pointed out, there's restrictions in it. And I like that your player board, you can only hold so many components.
Mm-hmm.
You can only hold 8 resources that you can have in your area, and as you send out your other workers, that frees up some extra spaces. But those really make some interesting decision points because you have to spend before you can reload. And getting the right components or getting the right resources that you need to advance your game or to go out and build can be very challenging. There's always ways to get a resource, but it's not always super efficient. Mm-hmm. And no matter what, when there's a lot of coins out there, by the time it gets to me, somebody took them all. So the last game that I played, I don't think I ever took any coins from that one action.
You had tons of money.
I had tons of money.
You had the cloth, and then you had to go a different route.
Yeah, I was taking a lot of that cloth, and as you said, I was getting 4 or 5 pieces of cloth. I could go and take that sell action and make $35 or whatever, and then I had to buy something, but you can only buy one because with that action you can buy 1, sell 1, or buy 2 or sell 2. So you're limited on how much you can take, which again I like in games because it makes those decision points very challenging. You really need to think about what you're doing, and you may have a play where it's you don't do a lot, but you're trying to get set up for those next plays.
And using that Mercator action where you're buying and selling, every time I use it, I'm like, why can't it be 3? Because I always need just one more good. And it's like, no, you're not allowed to do 2. And why can't it be 3? And which again, that's that tightness of I can't quite do what I want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I really like that. There's a diplomat card in here too that allows you to copy somebody's top card in their discard pile because it makes you pay attention to what other people are doing because you only have so many cards that you're going to play. And a lot of times you want to move twice and you're like, oh, I only have one architect card to start with. I don't want to pick up my hand. So, when you use that diplomat and how you use it, I think is fascinating because it makes me want to keep my head up at the table and pay attention to when people are playing their cards and making sure that I don't get screwed and everybody's picking up their cards and I'm stuck with my diplomat still in my hand.
Yeah.
Be like, oh, thanks guys for picking up all your cards now. So that's great.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant card as well. I really enjoyed that.
And then you mentioned about paying attention to other people when they're taking their turns. The other thing I'll say is we talked in Aquatica about, hey, sometimes it can seem like other people's turns can take a while. I never really felt that way not only in our recent plays, but any play of Concordia, I feel like the turns, especially once people understand how the game goes, the turns go fast. And it doesn't take that long, it seems to me, for that turn to get back around to you. Unless someone's doing the Mercator and can't figure out how many things are allowed to do. But other than that, it goes pretty
Probably
quickly.
me.
No, I agree with Chris. I think the turns are very snappy here.
Yeah, it does feel like there's a interaction in this game. Again, not directly competing, but you have following that lead card or the other card that's out on the board. So you're looking around, and as David pointed out, making that decision: do I play mine or do I not play mine, because I don't want him to take the action right after me. So I need to sit across the table from you, totally diagonal, David, because no matter what I do, you're going to take advantage of it. So I got to separate myself as far as I can from that. But I do like that you're always engaged in the game. When I'm playing it, I'm watching the board, I'm watching what other people are doing, how many resources, where they're going. So,
and you talked about interaction. I think that there's also a little bit of way, like when you were taking a lot of cloth, that to me helps guide me that if I'm going to build somewhere, maybe I'm going to build somewhere where you got your cloth, because I know you're going to be constantly perfecting those, and so I can start to use your actions to my benefit. David seemed like he was good at that last game, that every time I wanted to do something, but David gets a brick for that, or David gets something for that. And there's also, I seem like a bunch of little mini races for, okay, the more people that build in a certain area, the more expensive it gets. So if I need a certain thing, if I can get there faster, and especially when you're first starting out and everybody's coming from the same spot, those first couple, if you're one of the first people to move, you've got a little bit of advantage of, okay, I'm going to go to the spot that everybody needs right now. I get to go there first. And then as the game expands, how did I position myself to be able to either get that space first, get that card before someone else snatches it up, things like that.
Yeah, I think this game does really good. I don't think it's too loose, and I don't think it's too tight. It kind of does walk right in the middle. I never felt that everything was super tight. Maybe some people at this table did, but I always felt there was something I could do. There was a lot of agency to that decision, but some games are super tight. You're like straining. This game, it can be that way, but I don't feel it. I feel like there's always a route you can take. It's just maybe you don't want to take that route. And I do think you have to flip your strategy over time on this game and react to how other people are playing it.
Yeah, but I felt like a lot of that came later in the game when we were seeing what kind of cards people were picking up. At one point, I'm like, Chris, how do you know what cards David had? And you're like, yeah, he picked up 2 of these, 1 of those, 30 of these. And I was like, I was not even watching. I actually thought the player action was less in this game than Aquatica. Just because for me, it's like you go, you pick her out, you do this, you do that. But there is a whole other game within this game of those ending game cards. And you have to know, I think pretty early on, if you can, what route are you going with those? Because I don't think you can do all of them, but some of those were really big bonus points. And I would just suggest that if you are going to play this game, to know what those end game bonuses are, so you know how to chain your cities, your travel routes, and all that. I think that's just a really important piece to point out.
To follow up with that, the other thing that I'd like to point out is I think this game is better with more people. Because those cards get spread out more. When we played a 3-player game, I think it was David, me, and Dave played, you were just snagging up all of the 1 cards, and it was a runaway. I think you won by a whole lot more. The other games where we had a higher player count, even though there were different pathways, the scores felt much more closer together. I didn't feel like I was totally out of it. When you scored, I forget which cards those were. You scored like 60 points, which, if I'm lucky with 4 of my cards, I'm getting close to that. Yeah. And again, that goes to what Daniela was also saying, knowing what those cards do and how those cards score. Both games I played, I tried to go after, Chris, as you said, I had the cloth, and that's like the most expensive resource, and I tried to go to every area. At the end of the game, I think I scored 24 points for all of my areas, which seemed like it really wasn't worth it if that was the only thing I was going after.
Yeah, I think you need to pair not every god works with every other god, but I think one of the things you were doing, David, which is to me a great example of how 2 gods can work well together. If you have Jupiter and Saturn and you build the right way, so Jupiter gives you points for every non-brick house you build, Saturn gives you for every province that you build in. And so if you have those 2 together, you're collecting them, and now I'm going to build houses, but as I do, I'm going to make sure they're in new provinces. Now every action you're taking isn't scoring for 1 god, it's scoring for 2. And there are other combinations in there that, again, you can't do them all, but I think there are certain combinations that are going to work better.
Yeah. And I mean, one thing about this game I thought was a negative, but it ended up, after I played this game a lot, is a positive, is that the scoring track. I used to always think, wow, this is so dumb. We're not scoring any points. I'm not seeing kind of that interaction as the points kind of come on the board. But I thought that was a really negative point about this game, was that only the scoring was at the end. But I think the more times I play, and maybe I know, Danielle, you haven't played it as much as us, so maybe it's a frustrating point. I think it is a frustrating point for new players. But I think as you experience this game more and more, that when all the scoring's done at the end, I think it allows for a lot of different strategies to be played, when yet no one can actually see where you're at on the surface. So there's a lot of hidden stuff I think you can do and maneuver when you don't see a scoreboard.
But is that frustrating? Is it frustrating to not see where everybody's at?
It was at first, but now, because of the way I play games, I think it's better.
Well, and again, I think the more you play it, the more you are able to say, okay, I can see David keeps taking Jupiters and Saturns, so I know what he's trying to do. I get a general idea of what he's doing. But I think part of that is, hey, that game end scoring with all of it, and the way we tend to score, we'll score, okay, now let's all score our Jupiters, let's all score our Saturns. And so you can kind of see how different people are moving around. Someone will move ahead, and the next person moves. And just even at the end, just where you're scoring. Well, sometimes. But just where you're scoring, you can see that, okay, now you're ahead, now you're ahead. And I don't know, that's a little fun for me, that as we're going through the scoring, that it lead changes. Just with the games already everywhere, we're seeing lead changes.
Yeah, I also prefer games that score at the end where you don't know exactly who's in the lead, because that also helps too when people are trying to game it and say, well, if I go here, I'll get 2 extra points, and that may not matter as much in games like this. Chris, I know you do that, and that's why I lose most of these games. But you can do that. But I think with that, some of that information hidden or not totally out in the open, it makes it a little bit easier, at least for me. That's one other thing that I don't worry too much about. I should be paying attention to it during the game. At end game, it's too late to do anything about it.
Oh, yeah. All right, well, let's talk about some of the things that may frustrate us in the game, or things that we think could have a little bit more polishing on it. I mean, I think for me, one of the things is I played this a year apart from the first time I played it to the second time I played it. I'm not sure if this game really shows up new every time. It might feel to me a little bit samey. You guys can probably totally disagree. Again, I fully admit, it's been a while since I played the games back to back on this one, but I guess to me, it's very, you go a route, you travel, you lay a house, you do this, you pick up some cards. To me, it's a little bit ho-hum, but I don't know. I'm sure you guys feel different.
I don't know that I do. It's what, 12 years old, something like that. How many thousands of games have the theme of trading in the Mediterranean?
Yeah.
Literally thousands of games probably have that. And so I think it can be a little ho-hum. I still think there's a neat puzzle in there, but again, it's not like it's blowing my socks off and, oh man, this is so unique. I don't know that there's a whole lot unique about it.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, the other thing, I thought it was about 30 minutes too long. I don't know how you guys felt about that as well, but I know at one point I was kind of like, all right, I was trying to feel like, are we close to the end? I was kind of trying to, you can see the deck go down as you're working through it, but I was kind of like, all right, a lot of the space is maxed out. I don't think anybody else is putting their houses out. I don't know. There was something at the end that was very lagging to me.
Yeah, the plays that we played, they were around an hour and 40 minutes mostly. So they were longer than Aquatica, who we're comparing this episode to. I don't know. To me, I kind of felt the opposite, and maybe that's because we were trying to control the end, and so there was maybe stuff that was going on that you were hoping people wouldn't do, so you can get more turns in and stuff like that. But I kind of felt the opposite. I felt like this game for me went quick, and then when I looked at the time, I couldn't believe we actually played that long. So kind of more the opposite of Aquatica, where I was like, oh, it's a little going long, but then I looked at the clock and like, oh, that was actually only an hour. So.
Yeah, when I looked at the time, I was actually surprised that they averaged. I had it written down here as an hour 40 minutes as well. I thought it was like a 2-hour game. When you sit down and you play one of these Euro kind of games, that's kind of what you expect. And this one actually went faster. And if I remember correctly, the first game that we played, I probably should have ended the game earlier. Yep. Which would have made me win, but I didn't do that. Not, again, learning the game, that's something. But being able to actually affect when the game ends and kind of knowing when you want to take that chance or push for it, I do like that in the game. but I think it's something that, people need to get used to. This is a game where you have to play it a couple times before you start really learning those interactions and how to keep David from getting all the cards, because you got to pay attention to a lot of little things while you're trying to forward your own agenda as well.
I mean, I kind of feel like it's like if you ever run a race, like a marathon or like a 5K.
None of us. I was going to say no.
I mean, if you run a 5K, but sometimes you're pacing off of somebody, and I feel like this game tends to do that a lot. Where if you know that you're new, but somebody at the table is probably a better player than you, if you pace off of them and see when they're going to dive into going after gold cards and stuff, you can kind of stay on point and not necessarily get blown out. But you can kind of adjust your speed based on them. Even if you don't know what you're kind of doing, if you let them set the pace, because there is a time, I think, in most games, especially this one, where the tempo just totally goes. Like somebody starts making runs on things. And if you don't know that, hey, it's time to sprint, you're going to definitely get blown out in scoring. But I think that it's just, kind of that pace keeping if you're a runner. I know nobody here is a runner. I used to run. So, when you see that person start to move, especially at a marathon or something, you're like, I got to go or else I'm never going to catch him. Yeah, exactly. I mean, my final complaint about this game is just kind of what you guys talked about earlier. It's just the theme. I mean, it's so beige is what I like to call it. Like this game sat on my wall. I had bought it at a really good price. A store I think was going out of business, and it sat for like probably 5 years. Just because I was like, oh, I could play it, or I could play all these other games that look cooler. But then when I actually got into this game, I think it was a little bit better. But yeah, I don't think that artwork's doing anything for anybody.
Sad beige
personally.
game.
Yeah. It's not exciting to look at.
Chris, how about some of the things that you're thinking about?
I didn't have a huge amount of dislikes. I tried to make a list. I didn't have much. The one thing I had was really more of a nitpick, but I don't like the rule book or the rule books or the rule cards or whatever you want to call it. They try, and maybe some people like this. There's one card that is this is the setup and how it gets you into the game, and here's the details in this other book. But some things, when I need to look something up, I don't know where to look because everything that's on the setup isn't necessarily in the other rule book, and so I need to know where to look. And I don't know how many times I just can't find it. Okay. And then I eventually do, but it was like, why was that so hard? There's like 3 pages to the entire rule book. I can't find anything in there. So again, it's small, but it's frustrating when you need it.
Yeah, the setup isn't very clear.
All right, David, why don't you give us a little breakdown on the collector's corner? Yeah,
so right now, if you are looking for this game, this game's been always highly ranked on BGG, but if you're looking for it right now on Amazon, it's actually $51.27. It's 21% off, normally a $65 game. That is a really good price for this game new. I mean, this game, even though it's been out since 2013, it is definitely still a pricey game as far as, the value hasn't really gone down at all. On the used market, secondary market, I was seeing anywhere between 35 and 50. So that just kind of shows you the sale. If you're listening to the time of the broadcast, maybe it won't be on sale anymore, but it is a good deal if you want to buy this new at $51.27 right now on Amazon.
Well, I'm just going to add that I actually had it in my cart. I put it for save later. There's only one copy available on Amazon, so it may not be there tonight. Yeah, it may not be there price. After tomorrow. I thought it was a pretty decent price too. Everywhere that I looked, it was upwards of over $60.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, how about final thoughts, David? Sticking with you.
This game to me has aged like a fine wine. I don't drink wine, but if I did drink wine, this game has gotten better every time I play it. I'm still trying out new stuff. I still feel like there's stuff to explore. If anything, I'd want a couple new maps, but other than that, I feel like there's still a lot left on the bone for me to actually dive deeper into in this game.
Well, it's funny you said that because when Chris was going in the beginning intro and he was like, the one side is this country and the other side is that. I didn't know there were 2 maps on the board, so that's funny. No, that's great. How about you, Pete?
As far as my final thoughts on the game, I do enjoy, and I've been kind of going back in time and playing a lot of these older games, but I really enjoy how clean the play is and the mechanics. There's not a lot of fluff with it. There's simple, straightforward mechanics that work really well. And I think this is one of them. You have your set of hand, you play the card, you do the thing, and you pull it back, and you're gathering resources with some restrictions. I really enjoy this game. As far as blinging this out, David, I like your coins. I know they're kind of generic coins that we play with, but that would be one of the things that I definitely would suggest. The components on the game, I'm actually pretty okay with. I think they have a nice different shapes. I think the colors are fairly, easy to determine what they are. The player boards, yeah, I would love, maybe a dual layer board where they sit in there a little bit better, but it works fine. I mean, it's not like you're bumping your board and you're worried about, which number it was on. It's pretty easy to tell. So, my final thoughts on this game, I really didn't have anything bad to say about the game. I enjoy it without tipping my hat too much on when we get to voting here, but I enjoyed the game. Like I said, it's in my cart, so we'll see what happens.
See if we push by.
Yeah, I got your copy to play, so that's one of the benefits of playing with you guys. We all together have a lot of different games that we can play. So, Chris, do you want to take some thoughts?
This isn't really blinging it out, but the Game Crafter, which is a website that I use for some of my game design stuff, they also have game parts you can buy, and you can get the boats and the people in different colors as well. And so maybe you just want a different color that someone can play with. It's your color, and this doesn't have orange in it, but you can go out there and get orange things. So that's just an FYI. As far as my thoughts on it, to me, this is a game that when I think about it, it's not something that I show up at a game and I'd say, man, let's play Concordia. But if somebody whips Concordia out, I'm like, yeah, let's play that. I'm probably not going to ask for it, but I'll sit down and play it whenever you want to. It's a solid game. Like everybody said, I tried to make a list of dislikes, and all I came up with was I don't like the rule book. But other than that, it's a solid game.
Yeah, I think overall my final thoughts on this are, again, it's okay. I don't not like it, and I don't love it. So, again, I think to kind of Chris's point, if it's on the table, I'll sit and play it. I probably need a couple back-to-back plays of it to really understand all the Jupiter, Saturn cards and making sure you really understand that. So, again, don't not like it, but don't love it. So those are my final thoughts. All right, guys. So let's probably a good time to round up the colonists and head into today's Battle of the Funnest.
All right, everyone, the moment of truth has arrived. It's time to separate the men from the boys and the games from the toys. We're pitting these games head-to-head against each other in the ultimate face-off. In one corner, weighing in at 2.3 out of 5, with an overall BGG rating of 7.4, rising from the depths to declare domination, drowning the competition like a soaring tsunami, the marine monarch, the dictator of the deep, the boss of the brine, the CEO of H2O, Aquatica. In the other corner, weighing in at 2.99 out of 5, with an overall BGG rating of 8.1, a gift from the gods against all odds, flexing its quads as Vesta nods, following the pattern laid out by Saturn, able to unnerve you while calling on Minerva, one of the stars for Mars, Jupiter's juggernaut, Concordia. And now, let's find out who manages the competition better in today's Battle of the Funnest Showdown. All right, guys, you know how this works. We're going to evaluate these games head-to-head in 5 different categories: theme and production, mechanisms, value for your time, replayability, and the fun factor. The game that gets the most votes wins each category, and the game that wins the most categories takes the prize in our Battle of the Funnest. So let's start exploring our thoughts with theme and production. Daniela.
All right, theme and production for me goes straight to Aquatica, hands down. It's beautiful on the table. I think it's just, I love the feel of the cards, that kind of matte-ish look as well. That's going to be my choice. David.
Yeah, I'm going to have to say ditto on this. I think that, when I first saw Aquatica on the shelf, it just jumped out. That's why I got it for my wife, even though we haven't played it. But yeah, just the production itself. I think the production is really well. I love those dual player layer boards. To me, it's just a great production. Going over to Pete.
Yeah, we brought it up earlier. I think Chris did. This theme in Concordia has been played quite a bit, so that kind of takes a little bit away. And the production value in Aquatica is really, really great. The dual layer player boards, the little manta rays really kind of push it over the top for me. So I'm going to go with Aquatica. Chris, are we sweeping, maybe doing the vacuum cleaner in the pool type thing?
All right, then. This is Aquatica for me. I had a lot to say. You guys have all said it. I'll just say ditto, and we'll just give the win to Aquatica 4-0 on theme and production. We'll go to mechanisms, and I'll kick it back to Pete.
Yeah, mechanisms for me, it's going to be Concordia. I just enjoy the restrictions that you have with it. The card play is very similar on both of them, where you have your hand of cards and playing it. But I just like that you can do more. You're expanding. You're kind of vying for those areas. So I'm going to go with Concordia for mechanics. Daniela, I'm going to
All right.
Go
Well,
your
we're going
way.
to go opposite directions here, parting ways. So I'm going to go with Aquatica. As I stated earlier, I love the player board. I love the chaining aspect of that game. Again, it was just fun for me to be able to link a lot of things together. I know I had some help from players at the table as well, just saying, hey, you should do this, this, and this. And again, you feel like a genius when it all works out. So that's great for me. David.
If we were just basing off of one mechanism, and that's like all the chaining combos, I would give this one to Aquatica. I thought actually that's where I was going, but then, I heard Pete over here just talking to me, and he doesn't, he actually likes this game, even though it's about Rome. So, to me, the mechanisms, there's nothing necessarily unique what Concordia is doing, but kind of how they all flow together in that pot. That's what I think makes this game really good. Just that smoothness of production. And so for me, those mechanisms, I'm going to have to give this one to Concordia. Kicking it over to Chris.
Yeah, I agree. Concordia does nothing really super special. What it does do, it does really well and puts them all together. Doesn't matter. This one's Aquatica for me. The exploiting of the locations as you slide them into the board, chaining together and all those effects. It's really fun. I know chaining exists in other games, but this one just feels unique and it's certainly fun. So it's Aquatica for me, which means we have a tie in our underwater battle here. We'll have to go to our fifth meeple, Dave.
He says, I vote for Concordia since the game really works well with the mechanisms. Aquatica has a lot of potential, but it didn't work for me.
All right, so
Wow.
Concordia takes the win in mechanisms 3-2 with Dave's tiebreaker. We will go to value for your time. I'll start. Strictly base game, Aquatica, I mentioned earlier, goes a bit too quick for me, and Concordia always feels right. But if you use Aquatica's advanced mode, it gets better. But without the extra cards that come with that Cold Waters expansion, I feel the character deck's still too small. It's close for me, but base game to base game, I'm going to go with Concordia. I'll kick it to David.
I'm going to have to second what Chris was saying. I'm going to go with Concordia on this one. I just feel that when I'm playing both games, the snappiness of the turns when we play a lot of our games at a higher player count is just really nice. And then I look at the time. For me, if I feel like the time should be longer and I'm looking down at the clock and it's shorter than that, I feel like that's good. So value for my time is going to go to Concordia. I'm going to Daniela next.
I think you guys know where I'm going here because I've already stated this multiple times, but Concordia for me was a little bit too long. Aquatica to me seemed a good little sweet spot at that 3-4 player count. That's kind of what I'm going based off of. Playing at 5 count Aquatica honestly was not enjoyable. So, but I haven't played Concordia really at some smaller counts as well. So for my time and what I've had experienced so far, I have to stay with Aquatica.
Well, we have a 2-1 split right now. It's going to be 3-1. I'm going to go with
Whatever.
Concordia. I just think if I'm going to sit down and play a game, I just feel more engaged in that versus, again, sitting down and just kind of looking with my head down. I like games where there's that interaction and I'm paying attention to what other people are doing. And I just feel like I do that more with Concordia than I did with Aquatica. So Concordia for the win on that value for time.
Yeah, 3-1. Concordia takes that one. We will go to replayability, starting with David.
I think I might have tipped my hand earlier, but I'm probably going with Concordia on this one. I do feel that there's a lot of different ways you can play this game. At first, I was kind of like Chris, I think he mentioned earlier in the episode. I didn't really think there was a lot of different routes to victory, but the more I keep messing with it, I feel like there are. I feel like there's different ways you can get there. And so for that reason, I'm going to go with Concordia. Going over to Daniela on this one.
All right. Surprise, surprise. I actually will go with Concordia on this one
Whoa.
because...
You feeling okay?
No, yeah, I don't know. I'll take my temperature. I do believe playing Concordia. I watched David and I watched his interaction with Chris and what Pete and I were lagging behind. They were doing something different. And, again, watching the people around you who are better in some of the games than myself, most of these people at this table, actually everyone, let's be honest, there's a lot of very interesting ways when I'm watching everybody that I am watching what David's doing. I am watching what Chris is doing and Pete and I are doing as well. And so I'll say for that purpose, I do think Concordia probably has a little bit more to explore for me. Aquatico is a little bit, it's straightforward and I enjoy that in a game, but I will say for replayability, it might be a little samey, but again, I'd like to explore both of these games a lot more. Christopher.
I'm actually going to go with Aquatica again here. Both of these have changes from game to game. It makes every play different. I'll give them both that. I think Aquatica takes it down an extra level with respect to how the individual effects on each location card can be chained together. For me, that's where the fun is. That's where the difference is. Those are never going to be the same as you get those different cards in there. It's a fresh puzzle each time. Both of these games I mentioned earlier, I'll go back to them repeatedly. I do think, for me at least, Aquatica is going to have a different feel each time. Pete
likes Rome. We're going to stick with Concordia. As far as the replayability, I think, Daniela, you mentioned before when we set up this last game, there was one weed out there, and it makes for a different challenge. It's that little things that make a difference. Yes, the games probably all play out very similar, but as you're doing those things, they are totally different from game to game. It's a overarching full game, but each play to me that I've done seems like it's been something different. So I'm just going to go with Concordia with that.
So Concordia takes replayability 3-1. If you don't look at Dave's tiebreaker, we are at 8 votes for each game. However, when you look at the actual categories, Concordia is up 3-1. We go to Fun Factor, though, which I think, again, Fun Factor is always important. I will start on this one. I'm going to go with Aquatica again. I think right now I get more fun out of the unique aspects of Aquatica, while Concordia does seem kind of straightforward, seems samey to me as I'm playing it. Again, still weird given that Concordia is a game I would sit down and play anytime, but I really enjoy the mechanisms, having a lot of fun with Aquatica. I'm doing Aquatica. Pete.
Fun factor to me is the interaction with you guys playing the game, and I just feel that more in Concordia than I did with Aquatica. So for those reasons, I'm just going to go with Concordia. Shall I send it over to Daniela?
You shall. I'm going to go with Aquatica on this because with the game, the games that we played, I think I've played this a handful of times now. Every single time, I really had fun with the mechanisms of this game. And to me, that's what I'm looking for in a game that I can understand and easily try and eke out a win. David?
Yeah, I think this table is going to be split again. For Fun Factor, I'm going to go with Concordia almost for the same exact reason Pete said. I like going to the table and kind of matching wits with people, and I feel like that is definitely present in Concordia. I like reacting off what people do. Sometimes I like just messing with them and building on the same properties, so they have to pay me stuff every time they try to, get stuff. So, to me, the fun factor is there. That's what I like to have fun doing. But I can see why you guys like Aquatica. Half the time I'm looking over there, Daniela's doing this crazy combo, and I'm like, that's great, but I don't actually know what happened because I'm over here in my corner. So, fun factor for me is going to go to Concordia on this one.
All right, 2-2 again on Fun Factor. We go to Pete to let us know what Dave has to say.
Well, Dave technically is sitting on this side of the table, which is David and I's side. His vote was, my vote is for Concordia. It was fun expanding on the map, and even though you didn't get the cards you needed for a huge game score.
All right, so Concordia takes Fun Factor again. Pete mentioned the sides of the table. So Pete and Dave tend to sit on one side of the table. They voted 8-2 in favor of Concordia. Daniela and I sit on the other side. We voted 8-2 in favor of Aquatica. But when you break it down by categories with a score of 4-1, Concordia wipes the map with the competition and wins today's Battle of the Funnest.
Well, folks, that brings us to the end of yet another episode of the Fifth Meeple Board Game Podcast. We hope you enjoyed exploring these games with us today. And if you'd like to get in touch, just email us at thefifthmeeple@gmail.com or reach out to us on Facebook or Instagram. Thanks again for listening. And until next time, may all that you explore be fruitful and more. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening.
Adios.
Okay, Fin.
Probably a good time to round up the colonists and head into today's battle of what?
No,
oh,
sorry. Price.
Let me go to
real
David.
quick.
Okay.
Yeah,
Whoops.
And Chris.
I already did that.
Pete.
4-1 with the score. Hell. But when you break it. So I told you I've been doing yoga. Mm-hmm. It's the beginner 30 days. And so one day it'd be like, well, we breathe and look over here.
Yeah.
And then the next day it's like, okay, grab your right leg, lift it up over your head, wrap it around your neck 3 times, and bend over. Right?